Vacancy Legal Recruitment, a refreshingly unique and personal talent agency developed specifically for legal. Dedicated to the sector and with extensive experience working across legal services and legal technology, we bridge the gap between your requirements and top-tier legal talent. Get in touch today and say hello at vacancy.co.uk.
You're listening to the Today's Conveyancer podcast, the leading source of information for residential property lawyers in England and Wales. Don't forget to subscribe and sign up to our free newsletter at todaysconveyancer.co.uk. You can also follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter.
Hello, welcome along to the latest Today's Conveyancer podcast. Today we welcome Elizabeth Rimmer, CEO of LawCare, onto the podcast to discuss the latest survey that the charity is running, Life in the Law. The survey is out now, and I'm sure you'll explain where and how people can go and complete it. But the topic of discussion is the sort of general health of the legal sector as well, the general mental health of the legal sector. So thanks so much for joining the podcast, Elizabeth.
Thanks very much, David. I'm really glad to be here and have this opportunity to plug LawCare and the research that we're doing.
Well, let's start right there. Tell us in the first instance a little bit about yourself and the work of LawCare as well, which is a charity, isn't it, that's focused on mental health and wellbeing in the legal services sector in particular.
As you know, I'm Elizabeth. I'm the Chief Executive at LawCare, and I started my working life as a solicitor. So I was a clinical negligence solicitor supporting people bringing claims against medical professionals where things had gone wrong. I landed up leaving the legal sector and moving into the voluntary sector, and I've been at LawCare now for 10 years. LawCare, as you've already said, is the charity that supports and promotes mental health across the legal sector in the UK. We operate across all 3 jurisdictions, and we operate all branches of the profession. So people that work in conveyancing might be a licensed conveyancer, they might be a solicitor, they might be a Silex lawyer, they might work in wills and probate, family, crime, immigration, the city. We span the whole range of practice areas, and we also span the whole range of types of legal practitioners. So it's not just people that are solicitors or barristers, it's also Silex lawyers, trademark attorneys, patent attorneys, anybody that works in legal services, but also really importantly, people that work in the sector who are in non-legal roles. About 40% of people that work in the law in the UK are not legally qualified professionals. They're working in other roles like business services, HR, IT, AI, innovation, tech. So we're here for everybody. And we do 2 main things. We provide direct support to anybody that might be struggling with their mental health, and that might be a work-related concern or it might be something in their personal life. But we often find that there isn't really that separation. The 2 impact each other. We have a telephone helpline, email service, and web chat that people can contact us in confidence and speak to somebody who has worked or is working in the law. So our kind of USP is we get it. So if you phone us up and you say, I'm a trainee solicitor and I'm not sure I want to do this anymore, I don't think I'm cut out for the law, we understand what that means. Likewise, you might be a partner in a firm in dispute with another partner, and we kind of understand the dynamics of that. So that's really what we offer, is that safe space to talk about what might be concerning you and try and help you work out what you may need to do to move forward. And then the other part of our work is really around education and advocacy, which is what this survey is all about, is that we want to help legal practices and workplaces work out the steps they can take organizationally to better support the mental health of their people, and in particular identify what some of those risk factors might be in the workplace that could be undermining people's mental health, so they could take some steps towards addressing those. So that's the other big part of our work. We want to help people when they're struggling, but we also want to try and prevent some of those issues from arising in the first place.
I think it's fair to say that the legal sector has not always been considered a very supportive place to be. And I think that's probably still true, particularly once you reach the higher echelons of the of firm. Is that a fair comment? Do you see that is changing in legal services?
I think that is a fair comment. I think there's a growing body of evidence, not just here in the UK, but internationally, that culture and practice of law can have an impact on people's mental health. So we see quite high levels of stress, anxiety, people experiencing burnout, related, I think, to the high pressured working environment, the long hours, the sometimes feeling not well supported in the workplace, the stress around meeting targets, sometimes feeling out of your depth, the challenges of meeting the expectations of clients. There are lots of factors in law that almost create that perfect storm for some of the challenges that we see. I think things are changing in that there's greater awareness about these issues than perhaps there was in the past. I mean, LawCare was set up in 1997, so that is over 25 years ago. Before there was really this conversation around mental health in the workplace. But we grew out of a concern about how much lawyers were drinking and using alcohol as an unhealthy coping mechanism, you could say, for the pressures of working in the sector. And I think back then perhaps it wasn't articulated in the same way that it is now. But I think what is changing is that greater awareness. I think spearheaded particularly by the pandemic. I think the experience of living and working through a pandemic made many people reflect on their own lives and what mattered to them. Organizations had to change practically overnight in terms of working arrangements. People who'd never experienced mental health issues suddenly found themselves perhaps experiencing that for the first time. So I think there was a greater understanding. There were more conversations about what people were experiencing. So I think that is what's changing, is that awareness and discussion is on the up. The challenge is, how do we change that conversation into action to actually do something to make things better in our sector?
Well, presumably that's what the survey is all about. You're asking firms to complete what is a fairly extensive survey into culture of their own organization, their own experiences, and individuals as well. Tell us about Life in the Law in 2025 and what you're looking to achieve with it.
So we've just launched Life in the Law 2025, our research study, and the surveys are open until the 21st of March. As you've already articulated, we are running two surveys, one for individuals and one for organizations. So for individuals, we want people to share their experiences of day-to-day life in the law. So we're asking questions around their well-being, we're asking questions around the hours they work, we're asking questions around their psychological safety, we're asking questions around burnout, we're asking questions around how they're managed and do they feel supported, are they experiencing bullying and harassment. So we really want to dig into what are those day-to-day things that are happening for people working in our sector that might be having a negative impact on their mental health. And then the other survey that we're doing is for organizations, where we're asking people who have responsibility for mental health or well-being within their organization to answer some questions around what steps they are taking as an organization to address these factors. What we're hoping to achieve with this is that we want to produce a set of evidence-based recommendations that will be simple and straightforward, that legal workplaces, so if you run a law firm or a conveyancing practice, you could take these recommendations and think, this is kind of my roadmap for where I could start with thinking about what we need to do in our environment to start addressing some of these factors. So what we're really looking for is, we want to just understand the problems, but more importantly, we want to offer some solutions that everybody can get on board with and have something very practical and tangible that comes out of this.
I don't want to be negative about this particularly, but there is a criticism of, and not just the law, I think in general, of lip service that gets paid to mental health and well-being. You talk about creating some really practical guidance here for organizations. Do you see that attitude is changing, that organizations are moving beyond paying lip service to this and actually embedding things that make the workplace better for staff?
The conversations around mental health are becoming more amplified. And I think we're beginning to see firms and in-house teams and chambers recognizing that mental health is a priority. But I think we're not necessarily seeing that translating into action yet. And I think that maybe that some organizations just don't know where to start. They feel overwhelmed by this. I think there probably is an element of some organizations not really fully on board with this because they don't see the benefits or understand why this is so important. Perhaps thinking, okay, we better do something, so we'll train some mental health first aiders, which, mental health first aiders can have an important function in providing support. But in itself, that's not enough to address the underlying issues. And I think we need to help organizations and leaders in the sector get to grips with this by understanding the issues themselves and recognizing that an investment in addressing these concerns will pay dividends to their organization, because effectively, people who are in a good place with their mental health, they're going to be more productive, they're going to be more effective, they're more likely to stay in your organization, they're not going to be taking time off because they're unwell, or they might be leaving to go and work somewhere else because they don't like the culture or working practices where they are. So I think that's a really important part of this, is trying to make the case for why the investment in this matters, to help organizations see that they actually need a strategic approach. They can't just do a little bit here and a little bit there and put some sticking plaster over a problem without really understanding what those problems may be. And also, of course, every workplace is different. So just because the firm down the road have done something, that may not be the right approach for your firm. You need to understand your people and your environment to work out what you need to do. And I think our goal is to really drive that understanding that this should just become embedded in your day-to-day working practice and be seen as a strategic imperative, really.
It may very well be an unfair parallel here, but I see a parallel between the introduction of like the Culp and Cofer regime, where these were roles that ended up being placed in the hands of people who already had fee earning responsibility and who ultimately simply didn't have the time to go and do that function. There's a risk here we're in the same boat. This is yet another thing that gets added to the partners meeting agenda. Dare I say, nobody's going to put their hand up and say, yes, I'll have a good go at that, because they don't have the time to do it.
I think that's a really fair comment. And I think one of the things that we're looking at in this study is we're asking people, if you have a management responsibility for other people, are you given any leeway on your billing target? Do you see a reduction in that to give you the time to manage people? Is your management of your team or your people part of your annual appraisal system or your KPI assessment? Are people taking in account how well you're doing on your management side as part of your progression and perhaps even your reward? We're expecting there not to be very much of that, because we know we did this study earlier in 2021. We published the findings and we asked people in that study, if you manage people, have you had any training in how to manage people? And less than half of them had. And I think that's sort of trying to get to the point about this being embedded, is that if you're going to go down this route, you need to do it properly, and you need to give people the capacity to do these things, because if you just add it on to what's already, particularly for managers and senior people in the profession, a huge amount on their shoulders and in their inbox, the regulatory environment and the scrutiny practices under now is just increasing, then it's not going to get done very well. But it's recognizing that actually if you reduce somebody's target income to give them more time to manage people well, you may see the benefits of that. You may see an increase in productivity in that team. So I think that is a real catch-22. We tend to measure performance and success in the law by what people deliver in terms of billing and their outputs, rather than looking more holistically at what they might be delivering to an organization.
You last ran this survey, as you say, 2020, published in 2021. What was the output of that, and what trends without sort of second guessing what might happen, what trends are you anticipating you might see in the results of this survey?
So in the first study, which we actually conducted during lockdown, we had to delay it because we were going to launch it in the spring of 2020. And then we went into lockdown and we thought, oh, hang on a minute, let's see how long this is going to last, because it might skew the findings, right? In the end, we decided, well, this is going on quite a long time. So we had to launch it in October 2020. And we actually asked some questions around COVID and furlough and all of that within that survey. What our key findings of the first study that we did was, not surprisingly, that legal professionals are under mental strain. 69% of people that responded to our study, and we had over 1,700 respondents across the UK, said they had experienced poor mental health in the year leading up to taking part in the survey. We also specifically looked at burnout. We measured burnout. We're doing that again in this study. And we found from our sample, the respondents were already above the cutoff point for being at significant risk of burnout. We also found 1 in 5 people had experienced bullying and harassment in the workplace. And we also found that certain sectors within the profession were more likely to have experienced poor mental health, have stronger burnout scores, and those were junior lawyers, people with caring responsibilities, people from different ethnic backgrounds. So we were seeing that there are some groups within the sector who are more impacted by working practices in the law. So we sort of uncovered that and developed an understanding about what some of the issues are and who's more impacted by them. This time round, we are looking at those issues again, but we're asking much more questions around management this time. So we're asking people about their experiences in the workplace, of how they're managed and what supports their mental health at work. And we're also, as we've mentioned already, talked about doing that organizational survey. And without anticipating the findings, our expectation is, because these two types of surveys have been run in other jurisdictions beyond the UK, that we're expecting to see what people's experience in the workplace is probably a disconnect with what organizations think that they're providing. Their experience of the support on offer is not going to match what a firm thinks it's doing. That's what we're anticipating. I could be wrong, but that we're expecting that's what it's going to show, because then that points the way to enabling those law firms to better understand what they could be doing to improve things. So it's similar to what we did before, but there are some differences because we're taking a much bigger look at management. Oh, the other things that we're also looking at this time around that we didn't last time, we're asking people about their career aspirations, because we're seeing at LawCare an increase in people contacting us who are telling us that they want to leave the sector altogether. That used to always be like the 8th or 9th reason that people would get in touch with LawCare. And last year in 2024, that was the 3rd most common reason people were reaching out to us for support. So we're asking people, how long are you planning to stay in this job? Are you thinking of leaving? And we're also asking people about their experience of legal education. Did they feel their vocational training, if they're a legally qualified professional, did they feel that equipped them for the realities of life and practice? So we're kind of trying to delve in a little bit more to the pathway people have had through education, and also their current feelings around their career in the law. Our sense is that we're seeing an increase in people questioning if they want to stay in the sector. And I think that's concerning for all of us, because we need people to stay in the profession for a sustainable legal sector.
Keeping people in the law is definitely a message that will resonate with many of our listeners, particularly those in conveyancing, where the pressures there have driven quite a number out of the sector, no two ways about it. We are moving towards the end of the discussion. We've kept this deliberately short, Elizabeth, because we really just want people to go find that survey and complete it. So could you give us the information about where people can go to complete the survey? We'll also put the link in the podcast blurb as well.
Right. So the easiest way to complete the survey is just to go to LawCare's website, which is lawcare.org.uk. You will see a link there that will take you directly to our Life in the Law, and there you can click on it and take part in the survey. What I would say is that fantastic for individuals to take part in the survey, but if you are a well-being or HR lead within your organization, please do complete the organizational survey as well. Feel free to share the survey within your organization. If you want to share it with colleagues, please get in touch with LawCare. We've got a short article about the survey, some images and some collateral that we could send you that you could drop into an internal newsletter or put on your intranet site to encourage people within your firm or organization to take part as well. Because the more people that participate in the survey, the better the quality of our data will be and the better quality of the recommendations that we release will be.
And when are you hoping that the output of the survey will be released?
We will be releasing the findings in early October, and we'll be having a launch event in the middle of October to share the findings and the recommendations.
We shall look forward to it, and we will have you back on the podcast shortly thereafter to talk through the results as well. But Elizabeth, really appreciate you joining. I would second your sentiment around people completing the survey. Thank you very much indeed.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
The Today's Conveyancer podcast is available on your preferred podcast provider. It's also available on todaysconveyancer.co.uk. My thanks to Elizabeth. Thank you as ever for listening, and we'll see you again soon.
You're listening to the Today's Conveyancer podcast, the leading source of information for residential property lawyers in England and Wales. Don't forget to subscribe and sign up to our free newsletter at todaysconveyancer.co.uk. You can also follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter.